Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock sharp here in Europe, and I think we can start. My name is Emiliano Alessandri from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, based in Vienna. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the second day of the Bologna Peacebuilding Forum. I found the first day yesterday to be particularly informative. We had a very stimulating discussion, so it's a hard act to follow, but I'm sure we will have an equally interesting afternoon today with a panel on a more specific region, the Mediterranean region. Today's program is the product of a partnership between the Peacebuilding Forum and the Newman Network. The Newman Network is an independent Track 2 initiative launched a few years ago, which is led by the Institute of International Affairs in Rome, IAI, with the support of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the Secretariat of the OSCE, as well as the Compagnia di San Paolo Foundation based in Turin. And when we launched this initiative a few years ago, the idea was to foster a new conversation about the Mediterranean around some key concepts. One was that the Mediterranean had to be looked at from a global point of view. We wanted to innovate and move away from a more parochial approach that looks at the Mediterranean only from the perspective of the European continent. And we also wanted to feature new perspectives and new emerging issues. And I think with this collaboration with the Peacebuilding Forum today, we are achieving precisely that. We are focusing on a global phenomenon and global issue, which is climate change. And we're looking at the specific implication of this change on the Mediterranean region. And we're doing it with speakers who are bringing original perspectives to the topic. The panel that I'm chairing will be opened by a keynote speech. It will be followed by a paper giver. The paper will be made available over the coming weeks. So that's a concrete deliverable to today's program. And then we will have a discussion on the paper, and I will, of course, welcome your questions through the chat room. If you have questions already, please write them down so I can collect them. And we will do exactly what we did yesterday. So we will not give the screen to participants asking questions. I will take some questions and take them to the speakers. I want to thank, of course, all the entities that contributed to this effort and to this partnership. I would also like to thank in particular Bernardo Monzani and Bernardo Venturi, the two Monzanis who are behind this forum, and of course the Agency for Peacebuilding team overall, as well as Andrea Desi from IAI, who behind the scene put together this very rich and successful program. And also a word of thanks to Dr. Claudio Pezzi in Bologna from the Rotary Club, who has been a great friend and supporter of the forum from the very beginning. With that, I will briefly introduce our keynote speaker, who I already see on the screen, Ambassador Grammenos Mastrojeni, who is an Italian career diplomat and who is currently serving as the Deputy Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean, based in Barcelona, with a portfolio covering climate and energy issues. Ambassador Mastrojeni has a long track record of working on development issues, climate change, from a number of perspectives, occupying different high-level positions, including for UN bodies, and is very well placed to provide us with some initial remarks. Just a small note, the Union for the Mediterranean is an organization that my organization, the OSCE, strives to work even more closely with. We have a project on this very topic that we're dealing with today that is ready to be operationalized. The Union for the Mediterranean issued I believe last year or a couple of years ago, the first ever scientific report on climate change and its impact on Mediterranean security. But I let Ambassador Mastrojeni take the floor, and he will be followed by the paper giver. Please, Ambassador Mastrojeni, the screen and the floor and the microphone is yours.
Well, let me first of all thank the organizer for this very timely initiative. I believe that the Mediterranean is indeed getting objectively in the center of the problems connecting climate change with security and stability. Let's, as you rightly mentioned, thank you for mentioning it, we have sponsored the first ever scientific report about climate change over the Mediterranean. And there are some findings emerging. The first one comes from another report, which was actually based on Copernicus data that tells us that the waters of the Mediterranean Sea are the fastest warming in the world. The other set of data tell us that the Mediterranean region overall is the second fastest warming in the world, with an average speed 20% higher than the global average. Some impacts are forecasted as a consequence of this. It would take too long to describe them all. Let me just quote a couple of them. 250 million people in water insecurity in just a few years, or the increase of the sea level by 1 meter by the end of the century, and quite quickly around 20 to 25 centimeters. This measurement, 25 centimeters, doesn't scare anybody instinctively. Only if people think about fragile coastal cities, they might start being concerned, thinking, for instance, of the precious city of Venice. But another problem is elsewhere. 20 centimeters higher Mediterranean means that the Mediterranean salty waters enter the coasts and salinizes it. It means that agriculture around the Mediterranean will be mainly jeopardized, since most of it is concentrated on the coast. And we have a very delicate and soft spot in this, which is the delta of the Nile. At 20 centimeters higher Mediterranean means that the delta of the Nile will be salinized. And this can spell a lot of troubles on the agriculture and economy of a country like Egypt that has almost 100 million inhabitants. I could go on for hours listing the projected scary impacts, but it would be a big mistake to take all this as a collection of separated, although threatening impacts. The problem is that climate change is undermining the very basis of the balances that have governed the life, economic life, social life, security life around our sea. And we can understand it starting from this unusual picture. When we look at Europe, sometimes we stop and think about how unusual the idea of Europe is. If we apply the criteria that have been used to identify the other continents, Europe simply should not exist. We're just a tip of Asia. But still, we do recognize ourselves as a continent. Something similar can be said about the northern part of Africa, southern shore of the Mediterranean. It's Africa, but if you consider societal, economic, cultural dynamics, also it is not Africa. So here we have an identity, which is a shared identity, and together with the identity comes a set of interests. If we ask ourselves what are the determinants of this identity, of course there are historical, cultural, etc. But before that, the determinants seem to be climate, as it had been already somehow understood by Montesquieu when he elaborated his climate theory. And specifically, this identity is linked with the special role played in history by this area. If you ask people what is the most important revolution in human history today, they would be inclined to reply the Industrial Revolution because it's shiny and recent. But if we take one step back, we understand that the fundamental revolution in our history happened 10,000 years ago, and it was the agricultural revolution. It started with the end of the last ice age, and it started here around the Mediterranean. Not because around the Mediterranean there were smarter humans, but because here the conditions were particularly favorable, given by a large mass of water, which was not oceanic, was closed, which acted as a stabilizer of climate. When we think about the impacts of climate change, we are inclined to think that extreme weather events are dangerous, that impacts on physiology of human beings like heat waves are dangerous, but we forget that the real problem is posed by the fact that a more energetic atmosphere randomizes the behavior of climate. Climate is not predictable anymore, and climate is the clockwork of ecosystem services. So if you find yourself in a situation in which you don't know when it's going to rain, you cannot plan agriculture, you cannot plan economy still in our days. So why did the agricultural revolution start around the Mediterranean? Because here, the presence of this mass of water made climate particularly predictable. And it is in predictability that you can skip from being a passive user of the ecosystem towards being a manager of the ecosystem, which was the agricultural revolution. Now, by the fact that our waters are absorbing so much energy, this original function of the Mediterranean is reverted. So the Mediterranean acts not as a stabilizer, but as a chaos cause. It makes the whole system more energetic and more unpredictable. And this has a very high destabilizing influence. Moreover, there is also the change of another pillar of our balance, which is the fact that this particularly favorable climate was governed by the periodical intrusions of the Azores anticyclones that brought sort of sweet weather. The Azores anticyclones is being pushed away by the ever-growing intrusions of the Saharan anticyclones. And this means that Europe and North Africa that used to have something in common in terms of interest and identity determinants given by climate start to be split in two. And it might seem a quite abstract reasoning, but it reshuffles completely and on their foundations, the reasons of our being together. Let me give you a concrete example. The Mediterranean is the second fastest warming area in the world, but the fastest warming in the area is the Arctic. It comes with a lot of threats, but also with some potential advantages. One of them is the opening of some maritime routes that used to be sort of mythical, like the Northwest Passage and the Northeast Passage. So we are happy if in the North, together with all the trouble, they have some advantages. But if the Northwest Passage and especially the Northeast Passage become really viable, they are a precious source of income, evaluated at around $9 to $11 billion per year. But one consequence will be, for instance, that the Suez Canal will lose its value, that maritime infrastructures in the Mediterranean that currently host 22% of the world's sea traffic will lose their value. On the other hand, we also have new pushes for cooperation and unity. Since we start to share the same climate between Southern Europe and Northern Africa, we have spontaneous new trends of collaboration. I'll give you an example, a sector that nobody talks about, but which is very important. It's forestry and agriculture. In these sectors, the two shores of the Mediterranean started spontaneously cooperating more and more, not only because of solidarity and awareness, but also because the species which are vital and viable now in the South will be the species that might save our agricultures and our economies overall in just 10, 15 years. So I'm not talking to say, pay attention, European unity is being split in two. That's not the point. What the point is that if we are not aware, if policy takes this or does not integrate this kind of trends, it might transform into a source of conflict, or if not conflict, of destabilization of many unity trends. But if we do integrate what's happening, we might turn it into an opportunity. What does it mean? It means something which is amplified by the fact that the region we are talking about is characterized by huge asymmetries. One way to describe them is just referring to the consistence of international commerce around the Mediterranean. 90% of it happens among North Shore states, 9% between North and South Shore states, 0.9% only among South Shore states. It means that we are in a region in which some communities can and some communities can't. And this might give the temptation and the illusion that one part of this region should isolate itself from the rest and protect its own well-being and solidity. But this is merely an illusion. Science tells us that no one in this region is strong enough to face a change so vast and so quick with its own forces. We need to rely on each other. And I'll give you just a couple of examples. One is energy. I was talking with DG Energy at the Commission just a few years ago, and we recognized that there cannot be a Green Deal in Europe without the northern shore of Africa, the southern shore of the Mediterranean, because it's virtually and quantitatively impossible to become net zero emitters if we do not rely on the solar potential of the south, not only for the grids that have to be interconnected, but also for the non-grid component of energy. It can only become zero neutral if we develop green hydrogen, but green hydrogen that does not emit and has a reasonable cost can only be developed with the solar potential of the south. Or we often talk about technology transfer. The idea is that here we need each other. Technology transfer is perceived as an obligation of a more advanced north towards the south. But the truth is that if we take one step back, Southern Europe will have to cope with dry territories. And who has the experience of managing dry territories? A 3,000, 4,000 years experience, it's the South. We need their technology, although we do not tend to recognize it as technology. If you go along the Silk Road, you will find cone-shaped buildings like the one I'm showing you in the photo that were used along the Silk Road by traders to stock their perishable goods. In these buildings, the temperature is constantly between 0 and -4, and it doesn't spend a single watt of energy. There are many more examples of technologies of this kind concerning irrigation, concerning temperature control, that are absolutely essential for us too. But what is the overall result of all this? It's not ideological, it's not political, it's indicated by science. We have to share and rely on each other. The good thing is that if we take this path, if we integrate the danger that climate change might reshuffle and modify completely the foundations of our community, we are structurally forced to skip from a competitive economy towards a cooperative economy. It means we have to put things together. But this means also that the asymmetries in our region, which are the cause of the only real value that we never managed to achieve in the sea of civilizations, which is a stable peace. Well, if we do all that is needed to tackle climate change, it means that we need to build a cooperative and a better distributed economy. If we do that, we also come to solve the ever unsolved problem of the Mediterranean, which is peace. Thank you very much for your attention.